if we are moved to phase 3, which is all virtual, the teachers still would be teaching, but all students would be at home in a virtual setting where they would see their teachers in their classroom and they would run like a normal school day, just it would all be virtual. So right now, where we are at collectively as an organization is we are writing our plan. We're gathering as much input. We held a parent meeting at 9 o'clock this morning. We've got several good ideas that we're going to have to take back. Some of the ideas we're talking about adjusting attendance policies to allow for if students have problems logging in between hours in classrooms. If students are wearing a visor that attaches to a hat, what's the possibility that they could just wear the hat with the visor attached? You know, when you look at these requirements, and I would strongly, please parents, read the required items because we have to do those. The strongly required and recommended, we are going to try our best to accommodate and do those, but there are some that are virtually impossible. And again, I'll reference the 6 feet apart. Even if we could hire as many teachers as we want, we physically do not have enough classroom space to space kids out 6 feet apart. So we're going to do our best to space them out in the classroom, but that's why we're creating a virtual option for parents as an option for you. So I've gone over the executive order which started this whole process, which was issued on June 30th. I shared with you the return to school learning protocols and roadmap. Again, I strongly encourage you to read that. We are in the process of writing our plan. That plan will go to the board on August 10th, where there will be a presentation to the board. Through many of the meetings that we've had for the various components of the safety protocols, like for instance, in the roadmap, we have had board members sitting in or participating. So we've tried to accommodate board members and getting them in terms of part of the process. So that when they have to make this decision on voting it, they'll be much more informed, even though they'll have plenty of time to read the plan ahead of time. I talked to you about the stuff that we have purchased. We have cleaning supplies we've purchased, PPE, masks, face masks, etc. And finally, I talked to you a little bit about the online option. That online option, we are going to allow parents to, at some point towards the end of August, maybe the first week of September, we'll be asking parents to commit whether they want to do the virtual option or they want to do the in-person option. Right now, though it's not finalized because the plan hasn't been officially approved, we are looking at having the person's choice be locked in for approximately a quarter. So if you want to change your mind at a later point, you have the ability to go either back into the classroom from virtual or go from the classroom to a virtual setting. Again, we're trying to accommodate what's in the best interest of the students as well as every family's home life. There are some families, we have approximately, I'm going to guesstimate right now, about 75 families that are requesting the virtual option, which more information will be coming within the next week. If you aren't aware, on the website, there is a link that if you want to be part of the request for a virtual classroom, you can just fill out the information. We're adding people to a master email list that will be sending out information later this week regarding just kind of an update of where we're at and what documents you would need to fill out if you want to choose a virtual option for your child. At this time, I'm going to open it up to questions. I do have everybody muted. You should be able to unmute yourself. If you have a question and you want to ask it, just unmute yourself, and I'd be more than happy to take some questions. Before we begin, there are some things in this plan that we are still working through logistically as we get more and more people's input and thinking about the process. So in most cases, I should have an answer for you, and some I may have to get back with you because we're still working on the logistics of implementing the plan that's required by the state. But this time, does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
This is Courtney Manchek. My question is, my daughter will be in first grade, and my middle will probably be in preschool. How would it work with virtual live learning? Would they do it at the same time? Because I would have to help out both of them, if that makes sense.
Yes. They would be doing it during the time that they would be scheduled to go to attend. So, for instance, I'm going to talk about K-12 first. They would mimic their normal schedule, so they'd log in at elementary school at right now 7:50. Get their attendance taken by the teacher. They would do their morning work and whatever the first grader does. When the first grade class goes to music class, they would log into Mr. Finley's music and then be able to participate in the music class or art or any of the specials that the student has. The teacher would then say, we're going to have recess for about 15 minutes, and that time there would be a break for the student to kind of stretch your legs, maybe go outside and run. They do the same thing with the break for lunch. Preschool is a little different because much of the creative curriculum in preschool is exploring and playing, but in a learning sense. So their class, if it's chosen virtually, might just be it will be a smaller segment. Having a 3 or 4 year old in front of a computer for the 3 hours that there is probably going to be impossible to do. So, and a lot of the stuff that they are doing is center based, where a teacher's working with a group. So, for instance, and again, this might be just an example. Maybe the teacher's doing a literacy lesson with a book. So the camera would zoom in on the teacher. This person at home would be able to see the pictures of the book and hear the teacher. They might do a small group where the person at home is part of that small group. So that camera would then turn to the table the teacher works at with the small group, while the other kids are doing their centers. And so the student's getting the instruction. When the virtual student is supposed to be going to a center, another station, that might be where their day ends, and it's only during the instructional time that the preschool teacher is working with the preschool student. So it will look a little different for preschool just because of the age of the child and the attention span. A kindergarten, again, and first, it's going to be dependent on the age, but they're going to have much more of a with the class the entire time. And I say that because there could be times where the teacher says, okay, go work on, or she taught a math, maybe it's single digit addition, and the kids are going to work on a worksheet to complete. There is a possibility that that student would have a break from the virtual, but they would still be part of the class.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anybody else, questions or concerns or items that you want us to make sure we're thinking about as we're planning the return to school?
I have a question.
Yes.
My question is, so with the virtual, it's all or nothing. So does that mean if my 4th grader, she wants to start out in school, she goes to school and she's super uncomfortable with the masks and the PPE or whatever, we can't switch her to virtual? And also, like, I'm dealing with a student athletes exposure. If we have an exposure or, a parent at work is exposed, can those kids switch to virtual, or is it a sign up now or you're in school for sure?
Those examples that you have shared are things that we're working through and we want to accommodate. For instance, our intent is to identify who's going to be showing up to school and who's going to be on a virtual, so that a classroom teacher knows how to prepare. How many lessons or things do I have to upload virtually to this because we'll be using 2 systems. One is Schoology, which is the platform, and Microsoft Teams, which is basically the Zoom meeting but it's in Microsoft. Those are the 2 platforms that we'll be using. Everything that the teacher assigns, whether it's a reading or maybe it's a homework assignment or a paper they have to do, they could put links and websites if they're working on something, would be within Schoology. Now, the other question that you asked about, well, what if a parent has to quarantine and they can't travel their student, or the family's quarantine? Those are options that we're going to have to be able to allow, because we want the learning to continue for the student. We don't want an interrupted process. This system that we're putting in with the cameras is one. It is the only one in Macomb County, and I believe I don't even think there's any other like it in the state. because it's capturing everything that the class, it is real time. So where we see the advantage of the system, even if you take COVID out of the equation and forget about that for a minute, students who are homebound, or students who are, maybe they're sick and they have a cold and they shouldn't be coming to school, but they're well enough to participate, this option would allow them still to participate in the classroom, so they're not missing instruction. You know, at the high school, we sometimes have to suspend students, and sometimes even at the middle school. This would allow suspended students to still participate in learning, while if they were suspended from home. We've purchased several, about 100 hotspots, so for families that do not have internet ability, we can still provide them internet. We do know that there are certain areas of the district that do not get internet service, little pockets here and there. So we're going to have to work with those families on if they choose a virtual option and what that would look like. But to go back to your question, the ability of a student has to be self-quarantined or and so forth. By using the virtual, it allows us to continue that child's learning. The thing that we have to work through is the pupil accounting rules and how we code them for the state of Michigan. We either have to code them as an in-person or as a virtual student.
Okay, and for the first part of the question, if the younger students, you know, I've talked it over with my daughter, she says she'll be fine, but if she goes the first week and is a mess, are we going to be able to switch them? Because we'd like to stay with the district if, you know, we can switch her over to virtual.
One of the things that we're looking at is creating a time frame. And right now, if I looking at the calendar here, September 4th is the first Friday after school starts. So students would be in session for 4 days at that point. Typically, that's the day that we don't change classes anymore for secondary levels, or if there's a need to balance classrooms at the elementary. So we try not to do it after that date. That could be the date that we establish that, you know, we need to kind of make the decision by this date to see what you're most comfortable with. And what we're asking then is stay with it for a quarter rather than a full semester to see, just from a teacher management of the student. Now, I say that because there's probably is going to be some exceptions that would allow a student to go back and forth. Like, for instance, if you're quarantined, we're going to have to do something. We can't force a child to come in because we don't want them, especially if the family's being quarantined.
Right.
Yeah.
So you suggest if we think they're going to freak out to just sign them up for virtual and not even let them try to go in person.
You know, I don't mean to sound like I'm deflecting, but I think you need to look at what's in your child's best interest. When we start school, the kids will have been out of school for almost 6 months. And there are many, many kids, I'm guessing, out there that are probably parents too, that are ready for their child to have some type of normalcy in their life, and schooling does provide that. But I also recognize that we're in a time that we've never experienced before, and so we're trying to do everything we can with all the cleaning and the personal protective equipment and just the protocols we're putting in place to make sure the kids that are in school are as safe as we can make them. I will never say that we're going to be able to stop or prevent, because that's impossible. We're going to try our best to minimize, and it's going to depend on your comfort level as a family and as your students' comfort level. There are some kids out there with all the stuff that's on the media. I mean, you can't go any night without something being posted on the media or social media. But there are some kids that have some anxiety just about the fear of coming back. And so we want them still to be part of their class, and that's why we looked at this virtual option rather than what most districts do, is do it as completely online with no interaction, no face-to-face interaction with their classroom teacher. So I'd really look at, from between now and the end of August, in the next 4 to 5 weeks, what's the comfort level of your child is what I'd recommend. And having a because in 2 weeks we could be in a whole different, what I'm saying to you today, we could be in phase 3 and everybody's doing virtual. And our virtual is what I just described to you if we're in phase 1, 2, or 3.
Right. Just to leave you with this before I let you go to the next question, I see what you're saying, and I mean, I'm not one of the families that's really very worried. You know, I can see that you guys are putting things in place. But But just think about the little ones that feel comfortable until they get into the classroom, they see their teacher in the mask, and then they are terrified. So that is kind of my worry. So we'll just leave you with that. But as long as, I mean, if we'd have those 4 days to decide, that would makes me feel more comfortable.
And we appreciate that. That's why I had some of the administrators join us, because we'll be looking at that. Maybe that, because this is new for all of us, we might need to consider a longer window at the very beginning. But take it, definitely worth noted, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So what, and I might have missed this, you might have already covered it. If you do the virtual online learning, what would we do then when our student would have like phys ed or gym class?
They would actually log out of where their teacher's at and log into the PE class. So there's PE is going to be our hardest one to figure out how we do it virtually, but there are things that can be done, and it has been done in other virtual models that Mr. Barnes and Mr. Day and the PE teachers, Mr. Noose, and all of them are looking into, exploring. So that would be what they did. So if I'm in Mrs. Walters' class and I now have to go to Mr. Barnes for PE, I would log out of Mrs. Walters, log into Mrs. Barnes. And when I say log out, it's the Teams meeting that you click on another link to go into a different class. And then the teacher would be instructing that way. In most cases, the stuff that the students are doing, the assignments and so forth, would all be sent electronically through the platform Schoology. There may be cases where you might need to either pick up a packet. I'm thinking art, for instance. We might need to be providing the students that are virtual art supplies so that they have the stuff when the art class comes on, they know what to do with the art teacher. But in most cases, the assignments or the handouts to read would all be done virtually.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest difference from this model that we're launching this fall and what we did in the past, and I do want to compliment the staff, because on March 13th, we got the notice we're shutting down. On March 16th, we were shut down, and nobody expected it to be for the entire year. So for them to be able to pull something together as quickly as they did was pretty remarkable. I can't thank the parents enough. I mean, what you guys did to help us out to get through the school year, it has been also very remarkable. But I think the biggest difference in this one is, in the previous virtual, as a parent, you were doing a lot of the instruction with the student. There might have been Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams meetings that teachers held with the kids maybe twice a week or maybe 3 times a week, where this is, they are part of the classroom. It is possible for a teacher to have a laptop next to a student in the classroom and say, okay, Sally and Brian, you two are partners, and Brian's virtually at home, and they're interacting through the laptop. So the students feel as connected to the classroom as possible. That's our goal, that they have the relationship with the teachers that I think makes Richmond a great place. You get to know the teachers, they get to know you. You have email exchanges, all that we want to still have happen for students that opt for a virtual option. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
What is the protocol if someone tested positive with COVID-19, like classroom-wise, grade-wise, school-wise?
And that protocol will be written into the plan. Right now, we received last week the draft protocol from the Macomb County Health Department. The administrative team and I will be reviewing it tomorrow morning as part of our starting to finalize the plan. But in essence, the protocol, depending on the class and the situation, if there's someone that's tested positive, it could be a class that would have to be quarantined. It could be a wing of a building, depending on the interaction. We're trying to minimize student interaction with other students that are not part of their courses. So for instance, at the elementary, they're pretty much going to be self-contained the entire day. They stay in their classroom for their core subjects. That same group goes to gym, art, music, etc. They go to the lunchroom, and they pretty much sit together in the lunchroom. When they go to the playground, we'll have to do some scheduling things, but they're pretty much together at the play. So they're pretty much quarantined. So if there's a positive case within a classroom, the odds are it's that classroom that would have to be quarantined and not the rest of the building. When we look at the high school and middle school, again, depending on when it might be multiple classes, because, for instance, and I'll go back to Mr. Schlater as the chemistry teacher, he teaches 5 sections of various classes. So he's got 5 groups of kids that are coming through and seeing who was been in contact with who. So it might be some kids being quarantined versus others. And this option of virtual would allow us, while they're quarantined, to still provide instruction and an education for those students. So I don't know if I answered all of your question, because we just got the draft language last week, and we should have it finalized by the end of this week. When you look at the plan for the return to school, there's several parts that say the local school district will work with the county health department. So we get our guidance for those cases that you elaborated. We got our guidance from the health department on how we are to respond should there be a positive case in a building. The health department would also work, depending on the severity, it could be a building closure, it could be a district-wide closure for a period of time. And so the system that we set up with this virtual is, depending on what phase we're in, we can use this virtual the entire time. And I'll just give the example of, if we're in phase 3 where students are at home and we cannot do in person, the teacher would still be in the classroom teaching, but it would be virtually to all the students at home. Okay? Other questions?
I have a quick question.
Oh.
So what we're looking at is your plan is going to be full 5-day week, and kids will travel to every class. There's no, because I know some schools are dividing up the week with different teams, so there's only half and half in the classrooms, or they're having a teacher travel so that the kids can stay in the classroom.
So what our plan is right now, and I'll kind of go by level, at elementary, they're staying as a class. So for instance, as they would travel in the hallway to go from their classroom to maybe art, it gives us an opportunity to clean their classroom while they're in art. And between the art classes, we can sanitize the classrooms using our Clorox 360. So we're trying to constantly sanitize. We are moving some of our evening custodians up to day, so you'll see more custodial staff during the day, which would be cleaning down doors, handles, all the common areas kids touch. At the high school and middle school, there's things that we need to discuss that we have not finalized yet, like, are we going to issue lockers? If we're not, are we going to have students carry their backpacks between classes so that they're not congregating in lockers? If we are issuing lockers, is it going to be a different time slots that kids can have access? Do we need to structure the bell schedule so that less kids are out in the hallway? We've got signage going up and stickers to remind kids to stand 6 feet apart while they're waiting in the lunchroom line. We've pushed the lunch tables out to create as much space between tables. We're reducing the number of kids that sit at a lunch table, so to try to create that social distancing. With the mask, elementary kids would only have to wear the mask by the guidance while they're walking into the building and going to and from a special. While they're in the classroom, they wouldn't be required to wear the mask. However, secondary students with grades 6 and above are required to wear a mask all day, even in the classroom, except for the time they're eating lunch. Now, if they don't, it doesn't say a specific that they have to have a mask. It says a face covering. So it could be a face shield. So we have mask and face shields for students, depending on their comfort level. We may have some elementary kids who want to wear a mask or want to wear a face shield all day, or a parent who's requested, I would like my child to make sure they wear their mask and face shield. So our plan is we are trying to run school as business as usual with a lot of precautions and safety measures. The state has not changed the requirement that students have to be in school 180 days or 1,098 hours. They have to be in both. And school districts that are doing half-day options are going to have to go a longer school year because that has not changed yet. They still have to have every student have 180 days. Now, I say that, and next week the legislators could pass a bill and changes that, and what I just said to you is not true. But as of today, we have to schedule 180 days and 1,098 hours. We currently like to have, we have a large group that are looking at the online option. Other questions?
I had a couple questions. One's fairly simple. For preschool level, are you still offering full-time and part-time?
Yes. The preschool
Okay.
schedule that was articulated in the spring when we did Roundup is the schedule we're planning for in the fall.
Okay, thank you. And then the second one, you are kind of already touching on it, but to just straightforward ask you, are you guys looking at a hybrid option of in-person and virtual learning, or you guys are leaning more towards one or the other?
We are looking at having parents choose one or the other, but there are going to be situations that, as we talk through this and if we've written our plan, that are going to propose that we're going to have a hybrid in some cases. And I think the example that we used was if someone's quarantined, they can't come to school, so we want them to still be part of the, maybe they're not showing any signs or symptoms, but they've been exposed. Or maybe they've tested positive and they don't show any signs or symptoms. Well, they still have to be quarantined, but they can still participate in learning. So in that case, it would be a hybrid, but in general, it's in-person or virtual that we're choosing. We're looking at this as basically a quarter-by-quarter basis.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Drinking fountains, will those be blocked off as well? Because if your child is anything like mine, it's the biggest stalling tactic. And also bathrooms, if there's going to be any type of a tenant in there to make sure that they're actually washing their hands thoroughly as well.
One of the things that we had a conversation with the administrative team is having the possibility of expanding and having some individuals as part of the building staff to help us out in those areas. Like, for instance, at the middle school, there is no secure vestibule yet. That's part of the bond that will be renovated, and it will happen next summer. So when parents are coming in and dropping off stuff, maybe Johnny forgot his book or his lunch money or whatever, that we'd have someone at the door to get that from them rather than having outside. Because one of the requirements says you can't have outside volunteers in your building at stage 4. So we have to limit the number of people who are coming in. And so those extra staff people would be able to help with facilitate, especially at the elementary school when you have, boys in the bathroom or girls in the bathroom. Sometimes they don't always go in and do exactly what they're supposed to do. So they need a reminder or to make sure that they're washing their hands for that 20-second time period. So we are looking at, we're costing that out right now. As a district, we did receive some federal dollars from the CARES Act, which was the, I don't know if it's the first one or the second one in the stimulus, but we, as a district, we received about $188,000. Of that, about 20,000 of that went to the private schools in the area because we're required to be the fiduciaries for them for grants, just like we do for Title I and Title II, which are federal dollars. So the remaining dollars have gone to help purchase equipment, as well as you may have heard on the news, the state fixed the budget problem for this past school year because they were short money with the state being closed down. The dollars in the school aid fund were dropped tremendously, and there was a hole. They're fixing it for this year, but right now there's about a $1.4 billion shortfall for next school year. So that equates to about a $700 per pupil cut. So our Board of Education approved a balanced budget with a $700 per pupil cut, and there's some reductions that we had to do. So any dollars that is less than that would help maintain programs or possibly bring people back. But any federal dollars for CARES, we can use those dollars to help with these positions that I explained. Like, for instance, at the middle school, maybe it's, I don't know what we call it, but maybe a door monitor or whatever. And when during class time, they might be assigned to bathrooms to make sure kids are washing their hands, etc. So those, I'm going to call them temporary positions, could be paid for out of CARES dollars. We don't have much left of the $180,000. So in the news, you might be hearing about the next level of federal stimulus, which is targeted for pre-K to K-12 schools. And so to help eliminate that in our case, that $700 per pupil cut that we were planning on.
Did you say that you were gonna or weren't gonna block off the drinking fountains or anything on that? 'Cause my son's elementary, so I know they like to put their mouth on there. I just wasn't sure what the process was.
I believe the guidance talks about us not having drinking fountains available. So we would drop them, or much like we did when we first shut down before students we knew they were not coming back for the rest of the year. We went through and we started turning off drinking fountains so that there wasn't a common space that they could share and be able to transmit saliva and stuff like that. So our plan is that we will be looking. Now we'd have to look at what's the alternative of providing water for students. So that's still some things that we have to work out, because some classrooms have drinking fountains, some do not. And so we want to make sure that students have the ability to stay hydrated. So. Other questions?
I have a couple.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Jillian,
Go ahead.
Jillian Titus here. I have a suggestion about what Chrissy had commented on, but I also have a couple questions about the high school virtual option. Chrissy, I know you had mentioned that you were a little concerned about the elementary kids. I can tell you in the medical world that it's highly suggested to have buttons with the teachers' faces on it. It seems to calm the smaller kids' concerns with not being able to see the face. You know, you guys may want to look into that. That might help some of the elementary students. I know it's helped our granddaughter, who will be coming back to the district quite a bit, going to the doctors and things like that. But my question is, high school senior requirements, such as the community service, is the district looking to make some changes into the required hours to meet that requirement for high school? And then what about things such as like FATs and exams, if you're choosing the virtual option, which I know you know we are because of our own circumstances, how are those going to work?
All right, so as far as requirement and options, we would have to do much like we did in the shutdown that happened in March, April, and May. We would have to adjust, like I said, the community service hours, because there's potentially students not being able to get what they have. So we would definitely have to adjust that. It may even be suspending. Before I answer your second part, I just want everybody to know and I think it was important because prior to this meeting, I was on a call with the state superintendent, Dr. Michael Rice, and one of the things that he said was the plan that districts need to be prepared for. The plan that you're submitting is going to have to get amended and revised as you go through the school year, because there are going to be things that are going to come up that nobody thought of that we're going to have the flexibility to address. So for instance, not that we didn't think about the community service, because that was an issue prior, last year with the graduating class last year. It's on the list of to-dos. So we're going to have to address those. And I'm sure there are going to be some other things that are going to come up that are unique that we're going to have to be able to respond to. So the plan that we're submitting on August, and if you look at the plan at the end of next year, I would guarantee it's going to look a little different by the end of the year, because we're going to have to evolve and address things that, as things happen in our community, we may have to do things differently, especially if the phases change and we got to adjust and so forth. Regarding your plan for the SAT or the request on the SAT, right now it is required that all students take the state mandated SAT. So if they're doing a virtual classroom, and again, we haven't gotten guidance yet, but my guess is, and it's simply a guess, is we would have to accommodate and have those that are doing virtual be able to come into the school and be able to take the SAT during the window that the state. Now, I do know the state of Michigan has applied for a waiver to the Secretary of Education, Mrs. DeVos. So she, to suspend any required testing, but we have not heard anything. And as of this afternoon, when I was on the conference call with Dr. Rice, our state superintendent, he was not very optimistic that that waiver would be approved. Currently, and I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but there is a window in September and October that the current, I guess it would be next year's 12th graders, who should have taken the SAT as 11th graders, would take the SAT and the PSAT for, I think it's 8th through 11th, or 8th, 9th, and 10th. And then next spring, the current 11th graders this year would then take the SAT, what they normally do next spring. So the plan for the state is for the seniors in this fall to take the SAT and PSAT and all their requirements in the fall, which I believe our window is October. But I will have to confirm that with Mr. Castle and Mrs. Borwick.
Can you make a note to think outside the box for particular families in the district that may have circumstances that will not allow for certain students to be actually in the classroom? You know our circumstance. We've been quarantined 140 days. Children have not left the property. They're not allowed to leave the property for the safety of, another student. So that those types of decisions, I think, can make or break the virtual option in staying within the district work for some certain families with some complexities medically. Does that make sense?
I would say the district's position is we're going to do everything we can to accommodate the virtual and in-school students for any state required task. The challenge is going to be is whether the state's going to allow us to do that, because they set the parameters. They set, like SAT, they have a script that you can have no more than so many kids in a classroom. There's like a tape measure. Students have to be so many feet apart, all facing forward. They script that out that we have to do. So I can tell you from our angle in the district, we're going to do everything kind of accommodate, because we have not only your case, but we have other unique situations that we're going to have to address, and trying to give the students every option to be able to take and afford them that SAT and PSAT option.
Outside of the SAT and the PSAT, the exams and things like that are teacher driven or given, those things will be able to be accommodated virtually?
That is our plan, is that all the exams and assessments are virtually given for families that choose a virtual option.
Okay, perfect. We appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you. Other questions?
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
So I am so ready to get rid of my kids, right? I'd love to just drop them off right now with you. But it's so hot. How are they supposed to sit in a hot classroom in the fall time? Couple first weeks of school. I mean, I know they can't open the doors. Are you going to get extra fans and stuff for the classroom so these kids aren't dropping dead?
Some of the things that we're doing is looking at suspending some of the requirements. Like for instance, one of the guidelines talks about, and I'm looking at it's actually on the busing, but keeping doors and windows open while you're cleaning, or keeping windows and doors open in classrooms. So one of the things that we're looking at is creating a cross breeze, so keeping classroom doors and the hallways open, which is typically what we don't do from a security measure. There will be less people coming in the building. We'll be using less facility doors. Everybody will be going through a specific door to come in and out of the building. So with that aspect, we are looking at trying to create breezes and airflow in the classroom. We're turning the unit ventilators on in all the classrooms so that they constantly just run and circulate the air. In most cases, when kids are in there, they run anyways, because it measures the CO2 level in the classroom and tries to get fresh air in the classroom. But you are right. If it is a hot day, we currently do not have air conditioning, so it creates a little bit more of a challenge to keep the rooms cooled. But I did write down about fans and seeing there are really only certain fans that we can use in a classroom because of safety with kids who may, especially the little guys, the lower L students in
Right.
fingers in the fan blades, etc. We hope that, but we got to be safe. We got to make sure that
You're right.
you know,
No, they
those
would.
spaces on the grid are close enough that fingers can't get in there. So there's things that we
Okay.
got to look at. We just can't go out. Technically, we're not supposed to go out and you just purchase specific fans from Home Depot or Target. They've
Okay.
got to be have some safety regulations in them.
Okay, and then they would have to wear the mask literally like all day unless they're eating lunch.
Which grade level are you talking?
So my only one, 8th grade.
Yes, 6th grade through 12th grade, they're supposed to wear a face protection.
Okay.
It can be a mask. It can be a face shield. They could wear their own mask that they have from home. They don't have to use the one that the school provides. I don't have it here, but we did purchase, and if you've seen any of the graduating seniors, there you go, Mrs. Borwick has it on the screen there. She got the Blue Devil Richmond mask. We did purchase one of those for every student, as well as disposable masks. We have that for every student and staff, as well as disposable masks. But students can wear their own masks that they have from home. It might be one of the pull-up ones that kind of look like almost like a turtleneck style, or a homemade one that's been made. The assumption the district is making, because in the guidance that says the homemade mask must be washed daily, we are making the assumption that parents are taking care of that mask at home before they send their student. We're not asking every child, was this washed and so forth. That's one of those things that we have to make the assumption that we're all working together on that aspect of it.
Okay, cool.
Other questions? Okay. Just the 9 o'clock one, I did record that one, and I'm posting it on the website. So if you want to listen to that, it's similar. The information I provide is similar, but there's some other questions that might not have been asked here. I did forget to put record on this one until about halfway through, so this one will be posted, but it'll be the second half, and then I will post the 7 o'clock one tonight for those that are participating tonight. If you know anybody who has not participated, encourage them to, if they could, be part of the 7th. The ideas that you talked about, I wrote some things down, and I have it on the recording for us as the administrative team to begin looking at how we incorporate and address those parent concerns on the process. So with that, I wish everybody a wonderful day, and we thank you for your time.